What if the key to untold riches lies buried beneath a sea of scorching sand, guarded by shadows that whisper secrets of an ancient trade lost to time? In the heart of the Sahara, where the sun bleeds into the horizon and the wind carries stories of greed and betrayal, one merchant risks everything to unearth the forgotten treasures of a world long erased from history. Meet Zahir, a Berber merchant, with a tongue as sharp as a scimitar and a spirit forged in the fires of ambition. His caravan, a motley crew of outcasts and dreamers, each more colorful than the last, traverses desolate dunes that swallow the unwary whole. Every grain of sand is a reminder, danger lurks around every corner, and loyalty is as fleeting as a mirage. Picture this: Zahir's eyes are narrow slits against the blinding sun, reading the desert secrets like a seasoned gambler at a high-stakes poker table. He knows that the Sahara is merciless, but it's not the heat that keeps him awake at night. No, it's the whispers of rival merchants, the clinking of hidden gold, and the scent of betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Allies become enemies with the flick of a dagger, and every trade could be his last. But Zahir isn't just chasing gold. He's hunting for something far more dangerous, a mythical artifact said to possess the power to bend reality. Legends speak of it hidden in the bowels of the Kasbah, wrapped in riddles and swathed in curses. A treasure that could elevate him to the highest echelons of power or lead him straight to the jaws of death. What compels a man to risk it all? Perhaps it's the allure of glory, or maybe the thrill of defying fate. Yet, Zahir's heart beats with a deeper yearning, a quest for redemption that haunts him like a ghost from the past. Every encounter is a game of chess played in the shadows, where each pawn sacrificed reveals pieces of a soul tormented by choices made long ago. As they weave through shifting dunes, Zahir's crew finds themselves ensnared in an intricate web of rivalries and ancient feuds. Their laughter echoes against the barren landscape, a dark humor to mask their fears. A thief with a penchant for flamboyant disguises. An old trader with a penchant for ruinous prophecies. A warrior whose blade has tasted too much blood. Each member carries the weight of their secrets, but as the sun sets, those secrets become weapons, unleashing chaos as they clash against rival caravans hungry for blood and gold. The Sahara, a merciless master, tests their resolve. Will Zahir unlock the mysteries of the past, or will he be consumed by the very shadows he seeks to illuminate? As night descends, the stars reveal more than just constellations, they become witnesses to a saga of ambition, despair, and the relentless pursuit of something greater than life itself. Step closer and feel the heat. The desert has stories to tell, and Zahir is about to learn that the greatest treasure may be the truth hidden in plain sight. The wind shrieks through the narrow streets of a forgotten village, a ghostly wail that whips around the weathered stones, echoing cries of ancestors long gone. I stand in the heart of it, where shadows stretch like fingers grasping for something lost. The air is thick, heavy with memories, each one a whisper of the Berber people, those who once roamed the vast, sun-scorched sands, their laughter and song entwined with the very fabric of the earth. But now? Now, silence reigns, broken only by the hollow thud of a distant drum, a heartbeat of a culture teetering on the brink of oblivion. I remember my grandmother's voice, crackling like the fire that danced in our hearth. "We are the children of the mountains," she would say, her eyes glinting with a fierce pride, as if the Atlas itself coursed through her veins. "We are the guardians of the land." Yet here I am, a mere shadow, grappling with the weight of a history that feels both vibrant and suffocating. I can almost hear the echoes of those who came before, their dreams swirling around me like the dust of the Sahara. And then there is Amina, a fierce woman, her spirit unyielding, a warrior wrapped in the guise of a healer. She stands at the crossroads of tradition and modernity, her heart a battlefield. The village elders call her a witch, a rebel, for she dares to question the age-old ways. I watch her every day as she runs her fingers over the herbs she gathers, the ones that heal not just the body but the soul. Yet, in each deft movement, I see the torment etched on her brow. The tension between her desire for freedom and the chains of her heritage gnaws at her, a relentless hunger that refuses to be quelled. Beside her is Malik, a boy caught in the throes of boyhood and the weight of expectation. He watches Amina with a mix of admiration and fear, his heart racing like the hooves of the wild horses that once roamed free. He yearns to become a man, to prove himself worthy in a world that demands strength, yet his heart is tender, bleeding beneath the facade of bravado. When he stares into the fire at night, it is Amina's face he sees, illuminated by the flickering flames. He wants to tell her he loves her, that he would follow her to the edge of the earth, but the words stick in his throat, dying in the silence of his fear. All around them, the village pulses with life, and yet it feels as if that life is slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. The elders sit in a circle, their voices rising and falling like the tide, reciting tales of valor and heartache, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. Each story is a reminder of battles fought and lost, of love that was won at a terrible price. They speak of the time when the Romans came, their iron fists crushing the spirit of the Berber tribes beneath their boots, and I can almost feel the weight of that history pressing down upon me, as if the past is not merely a memory, but a living, breathing entity that shapes every moment. I remember the night the soldiers marched in, their boots a symphony of dread. The clash of steel against steel, the cries of women and children mingling with the howls of the dying, it was chaos, a nightmare painted in shades of crimson. Amina stood tall, her defiance blazing like a beacon in the darkness. "We will not be silenced," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din, but even as she spoke, I could see the tremor in her hands, the fear lurking behind her fierce gaze. Malik, frozen in place, felt his heart pounding with terror and admiration. He wanted to fight, to stand beside her, but the grip of fear held him fast. Memories flooded him, his father's stories of bravery, of ancestors who had fought with valor only to be betrayed by time. But this was not the time for tales, this was life, raw and unfiltered. The soldiers advanced, and with each step, the village shrank, the walls of history pressing in on them. I remember the moment Amina made her choice. She stepped forward, her body a shield between the soldiers and her people. "You want us to bow," she shouted, her voice echoing against the stones. "You will have to break us first." The air crackled with tension, a palpable energy that sent chills down my spine. In that moment, time stood still. It was not just her life on the line, it was the very essence of their culture, their identity. Malik wanted to scream, to rush to her side, but he was paralyzed by the gravity of it all, the weight of expectation clinging to him like a shroud. The confrontation unfolded like a tragic play, each moment heavy with the promise of heartbreak. The soldiers advanced, their eyes cold like steel. Amina's courage blazed, a fire against the encroaching darkness. Malik stood at the edge of the chaos, torn between fear and admiration, his heart a drumbeat of longing. And in that moment, the air thick with the scent of impending violence, I felt history unfurling before me, a tapestry woven with threads of struggle and resilience. I remember the drumbeat that echoed across the mountains, a reminder of the heartbeat of a people who refused to be silenced. The pulse of the Berber spirit thrummed through the ground beneath us, an ancient rhythm that called to the depths of my very being. Each thud resonated with a promise: we will endure, we will rise, no matter the cost. As night fell, the village became a realm of shadows, where whispers of the past merged with the hopes of the future. Amina, Malik, and the echoes of their ancestors danced in the twilight, a reminder that even in the deepest despair, the spirit of the Berber people would never fade. The stars above blinked like the eyes of a million souls, watching, waiting, longing for the moment when their stories would intertwine once more. And beneath it all, the earth sighed, the mountain stood sentinel, and the wind carried the stories of the Berbers, a promise that history was never truly gone, but always lurking, alive in the hearts of those who remembered. Heat shimmers off the golden dunes, a relentless oppressor bending reality, stretching shadows until they distort into grotesque specters. I stand at the precipice of madness, my heart pounding like a drum, a frantic rhythm against the desolation of the Sahara. The wind howls, a piercing lament that echoes across miles of barren sand, whispering secrets of lost souls buried beneath its unforgiving surface. Each gust feels like a warning, a reminder that life here hangs by a fragile thread, teetering on the edge of despair and survival. Beside me, Amina's eyes are wide, reflecting the emptiness around us. She grips her water canister tightly, her knuckles white against the cruel brightness of the day. Once vibrant, her laughter used to dance like the sun, but now it's trapped in the echoes of the past. "This place," she begins, her voice trembling, "it feels like a tomb. A graveyard for dreams." I can hear the tremor in her words, a shiver that rips through the sultry air. The Sahara is not just a desert, it is a crucible, a trial by fire that demands everything and gives back nothing. I remember when we first ventured into this merciless expanse, both of us naive, believing we could conquer it. I remember the thrill of adventure bubbling in my chest, the promise of discovery shimmering on the horizon. But that naivety is gone, washed away like footprints in the sand. We are lost, and the desert knows it. I can feel the weight of its gaze, the silent judgment of ancient winds that have watched countless lives crumble to dust. Beside Amina, Malik stands like a stone sentinel, his features hardened by the sun's relentless onslaught. He is a man forged in resilience, but even he cannot mask the flicker of anxiety in his eyes. "We have to find shelter," he urges, his voice low and steady, but I can hear the tremor beneath it. Nightfall brings more than just the cold. It brings the darkness, the things that watch. I shudder, a rush of fear coursing through me, as if the very sand beneath my feet is alive, whispering tales of horrors hidden beneath its surface. The Sahara is a vast tapestry of contradictions, its beauty as haunting as its desolation. How can something so devoid of life cradle such intensity? I feel like an intruder in this ancient land, a trespasser on sacred ground. The landscape shifts around us, endless dunes that rise like waves, undulating under the weight of time. Each crest conceals secrets, the bones of those who dared to tread too far, too boldly. I wonder, will we become part of this silent history? Will our dreams dissipate like the grains of sand carried away by the wind? Look, Amina gestures, her voice barely above a whisper. Ahead, a mirage shimmers in the distance, a spectral oasis that taunts our parched throats and empty bellies. Do you see it? Her hope flares like a candle against the night. I nod, but doubt gnaws at my insides, a cruel reminder of the desolation that surrounds us. The Sahara is a master of illusions, a deceiver that plays tricks on weary minds. I wonder, how many have chased after its mirages, only to find nothing but the bitter taste of despair? With every step, the sand swallows our feet, a consuming force that pulls us deeper into its embrace. I can feel the weight of the sun pressing down, relentless and unforgiving, as if it seeks to scorch away our very souls. Time seems to warp in this vast emptiness, moments stretch into eternity, and the ticking of a clock feels like a distant memory. I glance at Malik, his face drawn, etched with lines of anguish. I know he feels the weight of responsibility for us both, but the burden bears down heavy, and I sense it threatening to crush him. I remember stories of the Sahara, the legends of its creation, how it was once a cradle of life, bursting with flora and fauna, a paradise lost. Now, it stands as a testament to nature's wrath, a theater of survival where only the strongest endure. But even the strongest can falter. Even the mighty falter. I see it in Malik's eyes as he stumbles, the heat making his legs feel like lead, his resolve wavering. "We can't give up," he gasps, desperation clawing at his throat. I want to scream, to shake him awake from this nightmare, but the truth is, we are all teetering on the brink, watching, waiting for the inevitable. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that reach out like ghostly fingers, clawing at our sanity. It's a cruel reminder that the desert, in its vast indifference, does not care for our plight. I can almost hear the haunting laughter of the dunes, mocking our struggle as the landscape shifts and warps around us. Amina's hand slips into mine, a fragile connection in this oppressive inferno. "We'll find our way," she whispers, but even her voice falters under the weight of uncertainty. The horizon blurs, and I feel the pulse of the Sahara, a rhythm that sings of hope and despair, entwined like two lovers locked in a deadly embrace. With each heartbeat, I can sense the looming confrontation, the moment when we will either rise from the ashes or fade into oblivion. The desert breathes, its essence entwining with our own, fear, longing, and an insatiable hunger for life. As darkness embraces us, the temperature drops, and the chill seeps into my bones, a stark contrast to the day's suffocating heat. The night is alive, not with stars but with the haunting presence of the unseen. We huddle together, a fragile triad against the vastness, and I can hear the whispers of the past in the wind, echoing tales of those who came before us. The Sahara holds its secrets close, but I know one thing, it will not let us forget. Tomorrow will come, and with it, a reckoning. As we sit in our little sphere of warmth, the shadows dance, and I wonder, what will the dawn reveal? Will it bring salvation or an end? The landscape remains a cruel enigma, a relentless cycle of hope and despair. The Sahara is a harsh landscape, and we are but fleeting moments within its eternal embrace. The sun hangs low, a molten orb bleeding into the horizon, casting long shadows across the rolling dunes of the Sahara. You can taste the grit in the air, a bitter reminder of the land's merciless hold. There, a figure stumbles, feet sinking into the shifting sands, heart pounding like war drums in a battle long forgotten. The year is 1000 AD, but time holds no dominion here. Amina runs, her breath catching in her throat, each gasping inhale drawing in more despair than air. The ghost of her brother haunts her steps, his laughter echoing in the stillness, a cruel joke amidst the chaos. She remembers the nights they spent dreaming of cities, of bustling markets filled with spices and silks, of trading tales instead of barbs. But dreams are fragile in the desert, and hope is a mirage that flickers just out of reach. You can't go back, she whispers to the night, fingers trembling, clutching a weathered map like a talisman against the darkness. This is no mere parchment, it's a path etched in blood and sorrow, a lifeline forged through treachery and grit. The trade routes of the Sahara, twisted and tangled, weave stories of survival and destruction. There's Malik, broad-shouldered and sun-scorched, caught in the grip of desperation. His trade caravan, once a silver thread cutting through the desolate landscape, now lies shattered. Caravans are lifeblood, he knows that too well. He remembers the laughter of traders, the clink of coins, the way the air hummed with the promise of wealth. But the bandits have returned, and they strike like lightning, leaving only ashes in their wake. He stands at the edge of his failure, staring into the abyss of loss, of dreams turned to dust. Just one more journey, he murmurs, an incantation, a desperate prayer. He can almost hear the call of the Niger River, a siren song luring him back into the fray. Yet fear coils around his heart like a constrictor, squeezing tighter, whispering doubts that gnaw at his resolve. What if? What if he never returns? What if he loses everything, including himself? And then there's Fatima, her spirit bright as the stars that blanket the night sky, each one a flickering memory of the mother she lost to the unyielding sands. She has always known her worth, her power, the stories she carries within her, the tales of the women who traded not just goods, but resilience. I must find my way, she insists, though her voice trembles with uncertainty. She stands at the crossroads of destiny, where the paths of Amina and Malik collide, and the universe holds its breath. I remember the stories, she breathes, as if conjuring them from the dust. The trade routes stretch like veins across the desert, connecting lives and destinies. The weight of history pulses through her, coursing with the vitality of 100 generations. It's not just commerce, it's connection. But the desert is a tempest, and it swallows dreams whole. As they converge at the edge of the dunes, the wind whips around them, a howl that carries the cries of the lost. Shadows dance, flickering at the periphery of their vision, figures from the past, ghosts of traders long gone. Are we fools to chase after shadows? Amina wonders aloud, her voice trembling, yearning for clarity against the chaos. Fools? Malik scoffs, though his heart races with the weight of possibility. Or visionaries? His eyes blaze with determination, the flickering light of hope igniting against despair. Without the trade routes, we are but lost souls drifting through this wasteland. They gather in a circle, 3 souls intertwined in a tapestry of longing, fear, and hope. Each heartbeat becomes a mantra, echoing through the vast emptiness, a pulse that binds them to a shared fate. In the quiet, they can hear the whispers of the desert, tales of ancient caravanserais where travelers once found refuge, now reduced to crumbling stone and fading echoes. But Fatima closes her eyes, and she sees them, the merchants, the laughter, the exchanges of spices, of textiles, of glittering gold. It was never just about the goods, she insists, the words tumbling from her lips like grains of sand slipping through fingers. It was about the stories we wove, the lives we touched. Amina nods, the weight of her brother's absence heavy in her chest. And the sacrifices we make, she adds, her voice steady despite the tremor of her heart. The blood that stains the sands. The three of them stand on the precipice of something vast, like a universe of possibilities unfolding before them, even as the shadows loom closer, eager to snatch away their resolve. The wind howls, a mournful lament for the dreams that have been buried beneath the sands. The ground beneath their feet feels alive, as if it remembers the footsteps of those who came before them, traders, warriors, dreamers. Each grain of sand holds a story, and the weight of history presses down like a shroud. But as the sun dips below the horizon, casting the world in twilight, an electric tension crackles in the air. We will not vanish into this abyss, Malik declares, fists clenched, his resolve hardening like iron. We will forge our own paths. And with those words, the trade routes stir to life in their minds, vibrant threads of possibility weaving through the darkness. Amina, Malik, and Fatima, three flawed souls bound by fate, contemplate the endless expanse of the Sahara, the ghosts of their pasts, and the uncertain horizon ahead. In that moment, the air thickens with anticipation, a heartbeat echoing in the stillness. The shadows flicker, the desert whispers, and the trade routes beckon, urging them to step into the unknown. The night is alive, pulsing with the weight of dreams yet to be realized, stories waiting to be told. Somewhere in the distance, a caravan stirs, its silhouette a promise against the darkening sky, a reminder that the journey has only just begun. And as the sands shift beneath their feet, the birth of a new era looms like a spectre on the horizon, waiting to be written into the annals of history. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting a fiery glow on the dunes, painting the sky in hues of blood red and burnt orange. A lone figure sprinted across the sand, each footfall echoing a desperate heartbeat. Yusef, eyes wide with terror, clutched a burlap sack to his chest, his life's work, his heartbeat, his very soul. Inside, treasures of unimaginable worth jostled against one another, glistening gold coins, delicate spices that hinted at distant lands, and textiles woven with dreams of 1,000 nights. A shadow loomed behind him, a band of raiders, eyes glinting with greed and malice. The air thickened with the scent of fear, yet beneath it lay the heady aroma of salt, mingling with something sweeter, more potent. It was the essence of survival, the very essence that had driven Berber merchants like Yusef to traverse treacherous landscapes. He remembered their faces, the men and women who traded not just goods, but stories and lives, for a handful of hope. As he ran, the grains of sand whispered ancient tales, of caravans laden with gold and salt, journeys across the Sahara that could break a man or forge him anew. The cold weight of the coins brought a fleeting comfort, but the imminent danger gnawed at his resolve. I remember the first time I felt the heat of the desert sun, he thought, it was intoxicating. It made me believe I could conquer anything. But now, with every gasping breath, that belief slipped further away, as ephemeral as the twilight fading into the night. Meanwhile, in the heart of the bustling souk, Fatima arranged her spices, vibrant and fragrant, a palette of colors and aromas that could lure the strongest of hearts. She was a woman of fierce spirit, a master of her trade, yet today, anxiety twisted her stomach like a serpent. Yusef had promised to return with gold, but whispers of raiders haunted her. The spice trade was her lifeline, but without Yusef, it felt like a ship without sails, helpless against the storm. I remember my father, she murmured as she ground the coriander, the way he'd tell me tales of the great caravans that brought riches from the ends of the earth. Each crush of the mortar echoed her longing. The spices were not just goods, they were her heritage, her legacy. In a world where women were often invisible, she wielded her power through these vibrant treasures. But would they be enough to sustain her if her dreams turned to dust in the wind? The sun vanished, swallowed by the imminent night, and the air grew heavy. Shadows stretched, danced, and whispered secrets that sent shivers down spines. There was a time when the darkness was merely a cozy cloak, but tonight it felt like the breath of a predator. Yusef's heart raced, he could almost hear the taunting laughter of the shadows as he glanced back. The raiders were gaining, their whoops of delight echoing like the clanging of chains. Faster, he urged himself, as he stumbled, a grain of sand catching in his throat. Memories of his family faded into the background, his mother's gentle hands weaving a tapestry of hope, his father's booming laughter as he recounted tales of bravery at the evening fire. They had taught him the value of gold, yes, but also the worth of connection, of honor. Yet, here he was, on the brink of losing it all, a mere breath away from becoming nothing but a ghost in the sands. Fatima's heart raced, too, as she caught sight of the chaos unfolding in the distance. A commotion, a flurry of dust, and the shadows of figures racing against the fading light. Something's wrong, she thought, her hands trembling as she packed her spices away. The market that had once felt alive now buzzed with an ominous energy, thick as the spices in her jars. What good is trade without safety, she wondered, her mind racing toward Yusef, her partner in commerce and in life. Come back to me, she whispered, as if the winds could carry her words. The spices could wait, but her heart could not. As Yusef rounded a corner, he saw them, figures draped in dark, menacing clothing, their intentions carved in the lines of their faces. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, hungry, insatiable. I remember the tales my father told of brave warriors, he thought, but bravery felt like a distant memory, a leaf caught in a storm. The sack on his shoulder felt heavier, a relentless reminder of the treasures he carried, but also the burden of hope. Stop, he shouted, the word tearing from his throat like a prayer. It was futile, of course, desperation often is. He was just a merchant, a dreamer chasing the horizon for a glint of gold. A blur of motion, and suddenly the world around him splintered. The raiders closed in, their laughter slicing through the air like a knife. Yusef! Fatima's voice echoed in his mind, a lifeline tossed into the turbulent sea of chaos. You have to survive. In that moment, time twisted. Every heartbeat felt eternal, every breath a reminder of what hung in the balance. He would not let his dreams fade into the shadows, weaving through despair, he pushed forward. Each step was a silent scream, a plea to the cosmos, to the sands, to the very essence of life, I will not be extinguished. The stars began to twinkle above, witnesses to this unfolding drama beneath their gaze. The cosmos, indifferent yet profound, spun tales older than time, of merchants, of greed, of salt that preserved lives, and spices that ignited fires of passion. Yusef dashed forward, heart pounding, tears mingling with sweat, knowing that behind him, the shadows loomed, but ahead, perhaps lay his destiny, intertwined with love, with loss, with hope. And as the night deepened, the air whispered a promise, the story was far from over. The sun dipped below the horizon, igniting the sky with a crimson fury, a blood-red warning to all who dared traverse the Silk Roads. Dust hung thick in the air, mingling with the scents of spice and sweat, a heady concoction that filled the lungs of Mara, a merchant's daughter. She stood at the edge of the bustling market, her heart pounding like the drums of war as she clutched a small, intricately woven rug that smelled of distant lands and whispered secrets. Shadows danced around her, twisting and turning, mirroring the chaos within her chest. Will they come? She muttered, her voice barely audible over the clamor of bargaining voices, the clinking of coins, the laughter of children unaware of the world's darker edges. She was torn between the thrill of possibility and the gnawing fear that this day could unravel everything she held dear. Her father's reputation hung like a fragile thread, woven from the strands of trust and trade, and now, it teetered on the brink of collapse. Across the market, a figure emerged from the haze, Yarek, a tall, brooding foreigner with eyes like storm clouds. He had journeyed from the north, carrying with him not just wares, but stories of lands where sunlight kissed frost and mountains pierced the heavens. His presence was magnetic, drawing people in like moths to a flame, but it was the weight of his hidden burdens that ensnared Mara's heart. I remember, she whispered, the memory crashing over her like a wave. She remembered the first time he spoke to her, a simple exchange of words that somehow spiraled into discussions of dreams and destinies. They shared laughter over the absurdity of trade routes, the irony of their cultures colliding like freight trains, each bearing the weight of their own histories. But every shared glance, every fleeting touch, threatened to ignite a fire that could consume them both. Your father will not approve of our friendship, Yarek said, his voice low and laced with a tension that felt almost electric. He had already tasted the bitterness of rejection from her family, their eyes cold with the fear of the unknown, the dread of change. He was not just a foreigner, he was a mirror reflecting what they could become if they dared to reach beyond their borders. I don't care what he thinks, Mara replied fiercely, her resolve flickering like a candle in the wind. There is so much more beyond the walls of this city. Ideas, Customs, they're alive, Yarek. They breathe and dance. We could learn from each other. Learning is a dangerous game, he shot back, his brow furrowing as if he bore the weight of 1,000 untold tales. You could lose everything. And there it was, the unspoken truth that hung between them like an executioner's blade, sharp and glinting. The world was vast, insatiable, and commerce was its lifeblood, but every transaction came with a price, and hearts were the most volatile currency of all. They were drawn together by their shared hunger for more, yet shackled by the ghosts of their families and the fear of what it meant to step beyond the familiar. The marketplace erupted into chaos as a merchant shouted, his voice rising above the din of fire. Fire! Panic rippled through the crowd, bodies jostling, pushing, shoving. Mara's heart raced, this was it, the moment of reckoning. She grabbed Yarek's hand, their fingers intertwining, a silent agreement to face the unknown together. Come on, she shouted, pulling him toward the edge of the chaos. They darted through the throngs of frightened faces, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning wood. Each heartbeat echoed louder, each gasp for breath drawing them closer to the precipice of an uncertain future. But even in the turmoil, Mara's mind raced with thoughts of the world outside her city, of merchants from faraway lands brimming with tales of gods and monsters, of languages that flowed like honey and clashed like thunder. The blending of cultures was a dance, a beautiful chaos where every step could lead to discovery or destruction. As they reached a quiet alley, the noise faded, replaced by an eerie silence that felt charged with potential. Mara turned to Yarek, her eyes wide, filled with a fierce longing. If we can survive this, we can survive anything. Imagine the stories we could tell, the lives we could touch. He searched her face, and in that moment, she saw a flicker of hope beneath his stoic exterior. You have no idea what you're asking for, he replied, almost pleading. To embrace the unknown is to invite chaos into your life. You might find beauty, but you could also lose yourself. I know, she breathed, her heart aching with the weight of possibility. But isn't that what makes life worth living? The risk? The exchange of souls? Yarek's hand clenched around hers, their fingers trembling with unspoken fears and desires. And if we fail? If the world doesn't welcome us? The thought hung heavy in the air, a specter of doubt. But Mara stepped closer, her breath mingling with his. Then we'll create our own world, she said defiantly, her spirit igniting like a firework in the night sky, bursting with color and brilliance. Together! Just then, the echoes of the market reached them, a ghostly reminder of the life they had left behind, of the customs that had shaped them, and of the worlds that awaited beyond the horizon. In that breathless moment, they stood at the crossroads of cultures and identities, two souls entwined in the struggle against history's grip. The fire raged on, but amid the chaos, a new flame flickered to life, one that promised transformation, heartbreak, and the beautiful risk of forging a path never before walked. The shadows loomed, but with them came the chance to rewrite the narrative, to shape their own destinies through the profound exchange of ideas, languages, and customs that commerce had set into motion. As the shadows danced and the world held its breath, Mara and Yarek dove headfirst into the unknown, hearts pounding, spirits soaring, knowing that in the depths of cultural exchange lay both the heart-wrenching pain of displacement and the exhilarating joy of rebirth. And through it all, they would carry the stories of their ancestors, echoes of a past that would forever influence the future. The sun hung low over the Berber oasis, casting long shadows that twisted like ghosts across the sand. I stood there, heart pounding, listening to the whispers of the palm trees swaying in the wind, their fronds rustling secrets meant only for the earth. A scream shattered the stillness. It echoed off the rugged cliffs that cradled our oasis, sharp, primal, and filled with anguish. That sound, raw and haunting, was a call to arms, a call to love and to loss, and it wrapped itself around my throat, squeezing tight. I turned, stumbling across the parched ground, where the cracked earth mirrored my own fraying nerves. There, near the edge of the date palms, I saw Armin. His face was a storm of despair, eyes wide, reflecting the chaos that was tearing through the heart of our community. He was a man shaped by the sun, leathered skin crisscrossed with lines of hard work and heartache. I could see it, his wife, Layla, was in trouble. The village was buzzing with the news, spreading like wildfire through the tight-knit community, a web of whispers, each thread laced with fear. I remember the first time I saw Layla, standing in the market, her laughter spilling out like a fountain of joy, scattering the heavy air. She had a way of lighting up the dullest of days, her smile a beacon in our dusty lives. But now, that vibrant laughter was silenced, and it pierced through our oasis, a chilling reminder of the fragility of happiness. Rumors swirled around her. Had she defied tradition? Had she dared to dream beyond the boundaries set by our ancestors? I could feel Amin's despair crashing against me, a tidal wave of emotion threatening to drag us both under. His hands trembled, clutching the edge of his tunic, wrinkled fabric like his spirit, crumpled and worn. He was a father on the brink, the weight of his children's futures hanging heavy in the air, thick like the humidity before a storm. "You have to help me," he implored, voice low and trembling, as if any louder would shatter the fragile moment. But what could I do? I was just another soul wandering the sun-baked streets, wrestling with my own shadows. My heart pounded in sync with the distant drums of the weekly market, a pulse that drove us all forward, but left me feeling unsteady. I remembered nights spent sharing stories under the stars, dreams woven into the fabric of our reality, but those dreams felt suffocating now, caught in the tension of this moment. The stars blinked down at us, indifferent to our plight, cosmic witnesses to our struggles. They felt so far away, just like the hopes we held. I thought of the elders who sat in the shade, casting judgment like stones, their eyes narrowing with every whispered scandal. My mind raced, spinning tales of love and loss, of rebellion and tradition. I was a part of this tapestry, but threads were fraying, ready to unravel. And that's when I saw her, Layla, emerging like an apparition from the depths of our collective fears, her eyes blazing with determination. She was a warrior draped in the soft fabrics of routine, yet she carried the weight of revolution in her heart. "Amin," she called, her voice slicing through the air, sharp and clear. "I will not be afraid. I will not hide." The community held its breath, the tension a taut string ready to snap. But who was she fighting against? Was it the village, or was it the fear that we all carried, the fear of change, of stepping into the unknown? The sun dipped lower, and the shadows grew longer, creeping into our lives. I felt that darkness, every heartbeat echoed the weight of our collective anxieties, a reminder of how fragile life was in this oasis. I remembered my own struggles, the secrets that clung to me like dust on my skin. The joy of living here, surrounded by laughter and love, was often overshadowed by an undercurrent of despair. The elders' voices echoed in my mind, warnings of disaster, of the consequences of defiance. But what consequences did we truly fear? The loss of tradition, or the end of a stifling silence? Amin's gaze shifted between Layla and the townsfolk, their faces etched in confusion, awe, and something darker, resentment, perhaps. The oasis was a cradle of life, but it was also a tomb for those who dared to dream. I felt a fire ignite within me, a longing to stand beside them, to fight against the tide of conformity that threatened to drown us all. And yet, fear gripped my throat. What if the cost of this fight was too high? What if standing with Layla meant losing everything I once knew? The air crackled with tension, a storm brewing beneath the surface of our lives. Layla stepped closer to Amin, her hand reaching out, fingers trembling as they brushed against his. Time slowed, the world fading away until it was just the two of them, standing at the edge of everything, love and fear intertwined like the roots of the palm trees that surrounded us. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, I understood, this was not just about her defiance, it was about their love, their family, and the future they dared to envision together. The ground beneath me felt unsteady, shifting like the sands of the desert. I remembered the whispers of the wind, the way it carried secrets from one end of the oasis to the other, weaving in and out of our lives. What did we want from this life? To stay safe within the comforts of tradition or to chase the wild, uncertain winds of change? And then, it hit me, the true crisis of our oasis was not just Layla's stand, but the very heart of who we were. In a place that thrived on community, what happens when one soul dares to break the silence? I was standing on the precipice of something monumental, a wave of change cresting, ready to crash over our lives and reshape what it meant to live in this oasis. Amin's voice cut through my reverie, stronger now, filled with a resolve that dared to challenge fate. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said, his words resonating like the beat of drums at the market. Layla nodded, fierce and unyielding, and I felt the warmth of their courage ignite a spark within me. As darkness began to swallow the oasis, the air thick with unspoken dreams and defiant hearts, I realized that this was only the beginning. The echoes of our lives would intertwine, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. The stories of the Berber oasis were not finished, they were just about to become something extraordinary. And in that moment, beneath the vast, indifferent cosmos, we were all alive. Sand whips around the ankles of Amina as she squints against the blinding sun, a relentless glare hanging heavy above the dunes. The air is thick with tension, a palpable silence shattered only by the muffled grunts of her camels, those noble, resilient creatures that have carried her through the unforgiving desert for miles. She feels their heartbeat, a steady thrum beneath her palm, a rhythm that echoes her own urgent pulse. Today, everything depends on them. Today, everything feels like it's hanging by a thread. Amina glances at her brother, Farid, his brow furrowed, sweat glistening on his forehead like tiny stars lost under the burden of the midday sun. He's counting their supplies again, anxiety tinging his voice. "We can't carry more than this, Amina. If we push them too hard, we lose everything." His words tumble out like stones thrown into the still water of her hope, unsettling the fragile peace that rests upon them. But she knows the desert. She knows its moods, its shadows, its whispers. The camels, the ships of the desert, carry more than just goods, they carry dreams. Dreams of markets filled with vibrant colors, of laughter ringing over the clamor of negotiation, of spices and silks exchanged under the watchful eyes of the stars. Yet, today, the weight of survival presses down on her shoulders like the vast sky above. I remember the first time we crossed this stretch," Amina murmurs, barely above a whisper, a memory rising to the surface like a mirage. "You were so proud. You named our lead camel Sultana, as if she were royalty." A smile flits across her lips, but it's a fragile thing, easily swept away by the urgency of their situation. Farid's eyes soften for a moment, the tension between them easing, replaced by the warmth of shared memories. "And you promised to bring back the biggest bag of dates from the market," he chuckles, but the laughter is tinged with a bittersweet ache. They both know that those days feel impossibly distant now, as the harsh winds blow away innocence. Yet, the winds hold more than memories. They carry whispers of danger. Amina's heart races as she spots dark shapes in the distance, moving closer, figures on horseback, silhouetted against the shimmering horizon. They're bandits, the scourge of the trade routes, always hungry, always seeking to seize what isn't theirs. The air shifts, crackling with unwelcome anticipation. "Farid!" She gasps, the words tumbling from her lips in a frantic rush. "We need to move. Now!" The camels sense her fear, their muscles tensing under the weight of her urgency. She feels her hands shake as she grips the reins, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum of war. "I can't leave the supplies." Farid protests, eyes darting between her and the encroaching figures. "It's all we have left." He's rooted to the spot, a stubborn rock against the tide of their fate. She sees the conflict etched in his face, fear battling duty, love wrestling with the desperate need to protect. "Look at them, Farid," she pleads, desperation lacing her voice. "They won't stop. They never stop." She feels the weight of her brother's indecision threatening to pull her down into despair. "This is our chance. We can't let them take Sultana." The threat is as real as the sun scorching their skin, and she knows time is slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. With a burst of resolve, Amina leaps onto Sultana's back, her heart pounding, her breath hitching in her throat. The camel's familiar warmth beneath her feels like a lifeline. "We ride," she urges, a fierce spark igniting in her chest. She knows deep down, the bonds they share with these animals run deeper than just trade. They are family, the heartbeats that keep them alive in this merciless expanse. Farid hesitates, fear flickering across his features like the shadows cast by the setting sun. And then, as if pulled by an unseen force, he climbs onto the second camel, his resolve hardening. Together, then, he nods, determination etching lines across his face. The bandits surge forward, a wave of chaos approaching. Amina feels the adrenaline thrumming through her veins. She clicks her tongue, urging Sultana forward while Farid's camel follows close behind. The desert becomes a blur, the world a cacophony of pounding hooves and frantic breaths. I remember the tales of the caravans, Amina shouts over the wind, forcing her voice to rise above the chaos. They navigated the dunes, guided by the stars, united by purpose. But even as she speaks, doubt creeps in. Are they truly following in those storied footsteps, or have they stepped onto a path that leads only to despair? The bandits' laughter ripples through the air, chilling her to the core. They'll never outrun us, one shouts, and the darkness of their intent wraps around Amina like a shroud. But Sultana surges forward, muscle and grace, a beautiful defiance against the encroaching threat. Amina grips the reins tighter, her heart a wild animal, racing to escape the inevitable. As the intensity of the chase escalates, the world around them blurs, colors bleed into one another, sound warps into a distant echo. The camel's legs churn like clockwork, a relentless march against the desert's hunger. The horizon stretches with the promise of escape, but the specter of failure looms ominously behind them. Faster! Farid yells, nearly drowned out by the chaos surrounding them. Amina feels the fear radiating from him, an energy that propels them forward but weighs down her heart. We can't give up. I won't, she gasps, the words catching in her throat as they tear through the landscape, a desperate race against fate. The stakes feel higher than life itself, every breath a plea for courage, every heartbeat a countdown. And just as the final confrontation seems inevitable, as if the very sands beneath them have conspired against their escape, Amina finds herself wishing for something more than survival. She wishes for their bond to withstand the storm, for courage to conquer despair, for camels to carry not just goods but the weight of their souls. In the desert, every grain of sand tells a story, and as they race toward the unknown, the camels, the steadfast ships of the desert, carry more than burdens. They carry hope, fear, and love, intertwined through the vastness of a world both beautiful and brutal. This is not just a trade of goods, this is a trade of spirit, each heartbeat echoing through the endless expanse as they fight against the darkness closing in. The sun hung low over the Sahara, molten and merciless, as if the sky itself had succumbed to the heat. A gust of wind kicked up the sand, swirling it into a frenzy that clawed at the skin like 1,000 tiny needles. I was out of water, and the last sip had tasted like despair. Clara stumbled beside me, her strength waning as her feet sank into the shifting dunes. Each step was a battle, a rebellion against the choking silence that enveloped us, broken only by the distant, mocking laughter of the sun. I can't do this anymore, she gasped, her voice cracking under the weight of our plight. I could see the shadows of doubt creeping into her eyes, darkening the brilliance that once flickered there. We were lost, fractured souls in an unyielding expanse, where the horizon blurred into an illusion of safety. A mirage that taunted us with false promises. I remembered the stories told by those who had dared navigate this infernal desert. My father's voice echoed in my mind, his warnings a ghostly chant. The Sahara is not just a place, it's a living entity. It breathes, it watches, it devours. I shook my head, fighting against the rising tide of fear. I had to keep us focused. I had to pull us from this darkness. Look, I urged, pointing toward a sliver of shadow on the horizon. A lone acacia tree, stoic and defiant against the endless sea of sand. We can reach that. But even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at me. I could hear the clock ticking in my mind, time slipping through my fingers like the grains of sand beneath our feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of blood and fire. Night would come, and with it, the chill of the desert would creep in, a reminder that death was often an unseen companion. As we pressed on, I felt the weight of Clara's fear settle on my shoulders like a shroud. She was more than a companion, she was a reflection of my own despair. I had promised to keep her safe, yet here we were, teetering on the brink of oblivion. Memories swirled through my mind, her laughter, our dreams of adventure, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of the stars. Those stars were now distant, mocking us from their celestial thrones, as we trudged through an ocean of despair. Do you remember that night in the city? The festival, she said, her voice a tremor of hope against the backdrop of despair. The music, the lights, it felt like we could conquer the world. I smiled faintly, even as the memory pulled a tight knot in my chest. Yes, and you danced like there was no tomorrow. What if, she paused, hesitating, what if there is no tomorrow? The words hung thick in the air, a heavy blanket of dread. I wanted to tell her that tomorrow would come, that we would sit under those stars again, where the weight of the world felt light. But I couldn't. Not here, not now. I reached for her hand, feeling the heat of her skin against mine, a tether to the world that felt so far away. We're going to make it. I promise. I didn't believe it, but I needed her to. The very act of saying it felt like an incantation, a desperate plea against the void. As we neared the tree, shadows deepened. The sun dipped below the horizon, a fiery orb swallowed by the earth, and the temperature plummeted with a vengeance. The wind howled like a banshee, erasing our footprints, our existence. I had no compass, no stars to guide us, the sky was a blanket of darkness, and we were adrift. Which way now? Clara's voice trembled, the question slicing through the night. I scanned the horizon, the shadows whispering secrets I could not grasp. We need to find the North Star, I said, my heart racing as I recalled the navigation techniques I'd memorized but never tested. The stars were a map, an ancient guide, but tonight they hid behind a veil of despair. Do you think it's still there? She asked, her voice small. I remember. There are patterns, I murmured, searching the darkness with desperation. The stars move in cycles, like the seasons. They can guide us if we can just find the right one. The night pressed in, suffocating. The air crackled with unspoken fears, and I felt the weight of Clara's gaze on me, a silent plea for reassurance. I could almost hear her heart echoing in the stillness, a drumbeat of uncertainty. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, as if the very essence of the desert was calling to me. I pictured the sky, the constellations dancing like ancient souls in a cosmic ballet. There! The cluster! I pointed, my heart racing as a flicker of hope ignited within me. What if it leads us to nowhere, she whispered, the tremor in her voice cutting deeper than the chill of the night. Then we follow it, even into the abyss, I replied, more firm than I felt. I turned, ready to march into the unknown, but then I felt Clara's hand slip from mine. Wait, she said, her voice breaking. What if we don't come back? What if this is it? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. The truth was, I didn't know. But the thought of surrendering to despair was a fate worse than the unknown. I won't let that happen, I promised, though I could feel the shadows creeping closer, ready to swallow us whole. Together, we turned toward the stars, drawn into their depths, the cold air brimming with unspoken fears and dreams. The desert whispered its secrets, a language only the lost could understand. They were waiting for us, watching, the very essence of survival echoing in the heart of this unforgiving land. Somewhere, hidden in the swirling sands, lay our fate, and we had to confront it. With each step, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, the countless souls who had traversed this wasteland, their stories woven into the very fabric of the desert. Clara and I were but two more in a long line of dreamers and wanderers, lost yet striving, our hearts beating in synchrony with the cosmos above. We were not finished, we had only just begun. The sun hung low, a molten orb bleeding into the horizon, casting shadows that moved like whispers across the endless waves of sand. Layla's heart raced, the air was thick with tension, palpable and stifling. She crouched behind a parched dune, her fingers clutching the hilt of her dagger. The caravan had been ambushed, sudden chaos erupting like a thunderclap in the stillness. She could hear the distant cries of her companions, the sickening crunch of hooves on flesh, the shouts of raiders pulling them into the madness that had erupted around her. I remember the first time I saw the desert, she thought, the memory a sharp pang of nostalgia slicing through her fear. The golden sand, shimmering under a blue sky, had felt like freedom. But freedom had a price, didn't it? Now it was an echo of laughter swallowed by the wind, mingling with the screams of the present. A shadow passed over her hiding spot, and her breath caught. It was Hassan, his face smeared with sweat and grime, eyes wide with terror and rage. They were friends, no, family, bound by the arduous journey they shared. But beneath that bond was a fracture, a history that pulsed like a wound. Did he still resent her for the last trade? The last betrayal? Layla, he hissed, urgency slicing through his tone. We have to move. The weight of his words sank into her. Move. Where? The desert was a vast prison, its beauty a cruel mask. She wanted to scream about their dreams, about the fortune they'd worked for, about the promises they made, but the words tangled in her throat. They were a caravan of misfits, each one carrying burdens heavier than gold, and now, they were being hunted like dogs. I remember, she whispered, almost as if to soothe the ghosts around them. I remember the scent of spices, the bustling markets where life thrived. I remember the taste of freedom. Hassan pulled her close, the warmth of his body a stark contrast to the cold terror pooling in her gut. We can't think about that now. We must survive. His voice trembled, and Layla felt the tremors of his fear resonate deep within her. Each heartbeat was a countdown. The chaos rose again, a cacophony of violence piercing through the stillness. She peered over the dune's crest, and her heart sank. Bodies sprawled like discarded dolls, the bright colors of their garments now smeared with the dirt and blood of their struggle. The raiders, inhuman phantoms, moved with ruthless efficiency, their faces hidden behind cloth masks, eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. Let's go, she whispered, urgency carrying them forward. They crawled through the sand, every grain a reminder of what was slipping away. They reached the edge of the battle, a fray of limbs and screams that twisted like a living thing. A caravan's leader, a stoic figure named Jasim, stood against the tide, his staff raised like a beacon of defiance. For the trade, he cried, his voice a desperate roar against the tempest. But the raiders surged, and Layla felt the earth tremble beneath their fury. She could taste the salt of sweat on her lips, and it mingled with the bitter tang of fear. Jasim, she murmured, and in that moment, she felt the weight of their dreams, the dreams of the thousands of merchants who had come before them. Trade was more than gold, it was hope, it was legacy, it was life through the barren wasteland. And yet here they were, standing on the precipice of annihilation, facing the abyss. I can't lose you, Hassan said, but the truth hung heavy between them. Could they save each other? Or were they simply two souls lost in the desert's cruel embrace? They moved like shadows, slipping through the chaos, ducking beneath the swinging blades and howling winds. Each heartbeat echoed with the memories of laughter, of traders exchanging not just goods but dreams. Each step was a rebellion against despair, a desperate grasp at survival. Suddenly, a figure caught Layla's attention, a woman, cloaked in tattered rags, eyes wild with fear and fury, dragging a child behind her. A widow? An orphan? The child was pale, too pale, and Layla felt the familiar knot of anger and sorrow tighten around her heart. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Help them, she gasped, urgency surging through her veins. Hassan hesitated, his eyes darting between the fight ahead and the innocent behind them. We can't save everyone. We have to get out. No. It was a scream born of desperation, a refusal to abandon the fallen. We can't leave them. The moment hung between them, quivering with tension, and she could see the internal war in his eyes. Finally, he nodded, and they surged forward, weaving through the chaos, determination ignited by shared purpose. As they reached the woman, a spear whistled through the air, embedding itself in the sand just inches from Layla's foot. Heart pounding, she yanked the child close, feeling the warmth of life against her. Run, she shouted to the woman, run to the ridge. They raced away from the fray, adrenaline thrumming in their veins, a chorus of fear and hope. The desert felt alive beneath them, each grain of sand a witness to their struggle. But as they fled, the ominous laughter of their pursuers echoed behind them like a haunting melody, a reminder that they were still very much in the grasp of fate. But behind them, Jasim's desperate cries faded into the distance, lost in the cacophony of destruction. They ran toward the horizon, where the sky blazed with the promise of another day, but but the shadows behind them threatened to consume everything they held dear. I remember, Layla breathed, the words hanging in the air, trembling with the weight of what they had lost and what they still longed for. Each step was a plea, a prayer, a reckoning in the eternal dance with the desert that would never truly let them go. The past, the present, and the future blurred into one, a relentless tide crashing against the shores of hope. The sun hung low over the horizon, a molten orange eye, watching as the day bled into night. The market was alive, a cacophony of voices, Arabs haggling, sub-Saharan Africans bargaining, their languages a symphony of rhythm and urgency. I stood in the thick of it, heart pounding, weighed down by the scent of spices and sweat, the air thick with tension. My fingers grazed the coarse fabric of a vibrant tapestry, threads of stories woven into its very fibers. But today was different. Today, whispers of a storm hung in the air, the kind that shivers through the bones like a ghost, lurking just out of sight. "Do you feel it?" whispered Tariq, his voice low, eyes scanning the crowd, searching for something, or someone. His pulse quickened, an animal instinct alive. "Something is coming." I turned my gaze to the thrumming heart of the market. Shadows danced between the stalls, flickering like candle flames in a gust. Where was the light? I felt it too, that pull, a quiet anxiety. It slithered through my skin, coiling tight. It was the kind of feeling that made you want to run, yet I stood rooted, the delicious danger of the unknown enticing me deeper into the fray. "An exchange is supposed to be a celebration," I said, though my voice wavered. "Why does it feel like a funeral march?" Tariq shot me a look, one that spoke of secrets and stories told in hushed tones. He was a trader, yes, but also a seeker of truths draped in shadows, his own heart heavy with the weight of his past. I could see it then, the flicker of regret in his eyes, the ghosts he couldn't shake off. Memories of a land left behind, a family he longed for. 1,000 dreams lost to the sands. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air crackled. I could almost hear the whispers of ancient spirits caught in the strands of the evening breeze. From the edge of the market, a figure emerged, tall, wrapped in layers of indigo fabric, a flash of silver in the twilight. A trader from the east. Zoria, they called her. She was a vision, fierce, with eyes like burning coals, holding promises and threats in equal measure. "Why stand in darkness when you can dance in the fire?" she laughed, her voice like silk over stone. But there was an edge to her smile. Was it amusement or something sharper? Tariq stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We seek only to trade," he said, but it felt weak, a paper shield against the storm brewing in her gaze. "Trade," she echoed, stepping closer, the air between us thickening with unspoken tension. "What do you have to offer? What can you bring to the table when war could erupt at any moment?" Her laughter hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in silk, and I felt it, an electric pulse, the thrill of fear mingling with desire. "I have stories," I blurted out, the words tumbling from my lips like errant fireflies. "Stories of lands where the sun rises like a warrior's banner, where the rivers sing to the mountains." Her gaze shifted to me, piercing and assessing, as if peeling away layers of skin to get to the marrow. "And tales are worth nothing in a world where steel sings louder than words," she said, her tone mirroring the steel glint in her eyes. "But there is a hunger for connection, is there not?" I nodded, the weight of countless unspoken conversations hanging between us. I could feel Tariq's tension beside me, a coiled rope ready to snap. There was an urgency, a need to bridge the abyss between us and the unyielding differences we wore as armor. "Maybe it is not just trade we seek," I whispered, half to myself. "Maybe we search for understanding." Understanding. Zoria's voice was like ice, chilling my veins. "In this world? You are a fool to think so." The crowd swelled around us, a tide of bodies and voices, the scents of spices and sweat mingling with the encroaching night. I could feel the churning energy, the pulse of cultures colliding, a sacred chaos, raw and unrefined. But in that moment, it cracked, a sudden roar, a shout that sliced through the air, making hearts race and blood run cold. A skirmish erupted, bodies colliding, a dance of desperation and violence. Shadows leaped, and the market erupted into chaos. "Run!" Tariq shouted, grabbing my wrist, pulling me into the tumult. I stumbled, breathless, the world spinning, a kaleidoscope of fear and adrenaline. But a flash of indigo caught my eye. Zoria stood firm, unyielding, her eyes ablaze with defiance. "You think this will end us?" she called, a challenge hanging heavy in the air. "You think fear can silence fire?" My heart raced. What did she mean? She was not just a trader, she was a storm, a force of nature. And deep inside me, something sparked, a thread of recognition, of connection. The skirmish ceased as quickly as it had begun, the crowd dispersing like smoke in the wind. I turned back to Zoria, breathless, the space between us charged with unspoken words. "Are we enemies?" "Enemies," she laughed, a sound that echoed in the hollow space of my heart. "Or allies born from the ashes of conflict?" In that charged moment, I understood that this was not just an encounter between traders, it was a collision of worlds, a convergence of hopes and fears. There, in the heart of chaos, lay the promise of something greater than gold, an understanding that perhaps, despite our differences, we all sought the same thing: connection, hope, a chance to weave our stories into the fabric of history. But as the last light of day surrendered to night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, the cosmos shifting, the clock ticking. The storm was not over. No, it was just gathering strength, and the shadows were only beginning to dance. The sun hung high in the sky, a relentless furnace, casting a blinding light over the undulating sands of the Sahara. It was as if the universe had declared war on this desolate expanse, and the scorched earth bore witness to the suffering of those who dared traverse it. I stood there, parched and gasping, the bitter taste of sand in my throat, when the distant rumble of hooves shattered the stillness. Panic surged through me like wildfire. Bandits, the spectre that haunted every merchant's dreams, were coming. I remember Yosef, a man with a heart as expansive as the desert itself, who once laughed in the face of danger. His smile could outshine the sun, but here, with shadows of dread creeping upon us, I saw his bravado falter. "We cannot run," he said, voice trembling like the shivering mirage on the horizon. "If we turn now, they'll hunt us down like wild dogs." His eyes, usually bright with mischief, were now dark pools of fear and defiance. We had set out with dreams of fortune, silks, spices, gold, each grain of sand beneath our feet whispered promises of wealth. But the Sahara was a cruel mistress. It gave and took without warning, and hope was as fleeting as the shadows cast by the shifting dunes. The sun beat down mercilessly, its rays slicing through the air, suffocating us in their intensity. I felt the weight of my own desperation, my lungs burning from thirst and the bitter taste of futility in my mouth. Each day was a battle. The wind, a wild beast, howled through the canyons of sand, lifting plumes of grit that stung our eyes and scraped our skin. I remember the night the storm hit, dark clouds swirling above, thunder rumbling like the approach of a vengeful army. We huddled beneath a makeshift shelter, clutching our goods to our chests, hearts pounding in sync with the tempest. "We'll make it," Yosef whispered, though his voice trembled. His faith was a flickering candle in the howling darkness, and I clung to it, even as the tempest raged outside, threatening to swallow us whole. Then there was Amina, fierce and fragile, with a spirit that rivaled the desert wind. She carried her mother's necklace and the weight of her dreams, freedom, a life beyond the sands, a chance to breathe without fear. Yet as the storm raged, desolation crept into her gaze. "What if this is how it ends?" she asked, fingers tightening around the chain, the metal cool against her palm. "What if the desert swallows us, and we are nothing but whispers in the wind?" Her voice, the haunting melody, sliced through the howling storm. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that fate had no hold on us, but the truth was a heavy burden. We were nothing against the vastness of the Sahara, mere specks on a canvas painted by the gods of old. When the storm finally passed, it left behind a silence so profound it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. And then, the ground trembled under the weight of a new terror. A band of raiders, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light, emerged from the shadows of the dunes. I could see the glint of steel, the flash of cruel smiles. "What do we have here?" their leader sneered, circling us like a predator sizing up its prey. Yosef stepped forward, fists clenched, a lion ready to defend his pride. "We have nothing for you," he growled, voice steady even as fear danced in his eyes. I admired his courage, it was a fire that could warm the coldest of hearts. But as the bandits closed in, I felt the icy grip of despair. This was the moment that would either break us or forge us anew. I remember the sound of metal clashing, the terrified screams of Amina as she took a stand beside Yosef. She was small, but her spirit roared like a tempest. "You will not take us," she shouted, and for a heartbeat, the world paused. It was a moment of brilliance against the bleak backdrop of despair. Yet, darkness descended like a shroud, and in the chaos, I lost myself. The sands became soaked with the terror of our struggle, the air thick with desperation, the cries of the wounded echoing in my ears. I fought, not just for survival but for the dreams we had spun in laughter and warmth. Hours passed, time twisted in the chaos, surreal and nightmarish. Friends became shadows, voices blended into a cacophony of fear. I felt the chill of despair seep into my bones as I witnessed brutality unfold, the dance of life and death painted in shades of crimson and sand. When the dust finally settled, we were left with silence, the haunting echo of what had transpired. Yosef lay still, his spirit snuffed out like a candle, and Amina held him, wailing like a wounded bird. I stood paralyzed, drenched in sorrow, my heart a hollow echo chamber of grief. And as night fell, the stars blinked down, indifferent witnesses to our suffering. The cosmos loomed large, mocking our insignificance, yet in their vastness, I found a flicker of hope. I remembered the stories of old, how the desert could be unkind, but also how it had birthed legends, those who had dared to dream, to confront their fears. In that dark moment, surrounded by loss and despair, I realized the Sahara would continue to challenge us. It would test our wills, our bodies, and our souls, but within its trials lay the essence of survival, the heartbeat of life against the relentless sands. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold, I felt the stirring of resolve deep within me. I would carry Yosef and Amina with me, their dreams woven into the fabric of my own. The journey would not end here. The Sahara was a loop, an endless cycle of challenges and triumphs. I took a step forward into the dawn, the weight of the past heavy upon my shoulders, yet my heart surged with determination. The desert would continue its relentless dance of danger, but I would not falter. The sands whispered secrets, and I was ready to listen. The market thrummed with life, a chaotic orchestra of scents and sounds. Spices danced in the air, their bold aromas weaving around me like an intoxicating potion, cinnamon, cumin, and the sharp, sweet tang of saffron. I remember the first time I stepped into that vibrant marketplace, the sun blazing down as traders shouted, bartering their goods with a fervor reminiscent of a war cry. I stood there, an outsider, my heart pounding in my chest, caught between the allure of prosperity and the dread of alienation. Across the bustling square stood Zainab, her dark eyes sparkling with ambition. A merchant's daughter, she was destined for greatness, or so everyone said. Yet, beneath her confident smile lay an ache, a gnawing fear that her father's empire, built on the backs of caravans and the rich tapestry of Islamic trade routes, could crumble at any moment. She grasped the edge of her silk scarf, anxiety threading through her fingers, and the weight of expectation pressed down on her like an iron shackle. Then there was Malik, a trader from far-off lands. He bore the burden of secrets, his heart a map of unfulfilled dreams and regrets. Every coin he exchanged felt like a gamble, a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative of his life. He had witnessed the ebb and flow of fortune, felt the sting of betrayal in the eyes of those he once called allies. As he stood there, his calloused hands clutching a pouch of gold, I could see the ghosts of his past dancing behind his eyes, deals made in shadows, alliances forged in blood. The moment shifted. A commotion erupted, a clash of voices that sent a tremor through the crowd. I felt the tension swell, an invisible thread tightening around us all. Zainab's gaze darted towards the source of the noise, her pulse quickening. "It's the Persians," she whispered, urgency lacing her voice. "They want control of the trade routes." Malik's jaw clenched. Control. That's what it always comes down to. His frustration was palpable, a fire igniting in the pit of his stomach. With every word, I could see the battle waging within him, loyalty to his people versus the harsh realities of commerce driven by the spread of Islam. Do you think they'll bring war? Zainab's voice trembled, the weight of the question hanging heavy between us. It was a crisis of identity, of belonging. The silk of her scarf brushed against my arm, and I could feel the pulse of history, the rise of a faith that bound together traders from diverse lands. Yet, like the spices that filled the air, it also had the power to ignite conflict. The very fabric of trade, of relationships, was woven with threads of faith and fear. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, the market transformed. The laughter of children turned into muted whispers, the jingle of coins now sounded like chains. Merchants huddled, exchanging glances laced with suspicion. In that fleeting moment, I witnessed something hauntingly beautiful, a convergence of cultures, a shared humanity held hostage by the very forces that connected them. The Islamic principles of honesty and fair trade hung in the air, yet so did the spectre of strife. I remember the weight of the moment, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Zainab stepped closer to me, her breath warm against my cheek. "What if we could change it?" she said, her voice barely a whisper, reverberating with a fierce hope. "What if we could rewrite the rules?" Malik's laughter was bitter, laced with the taste of ash. "Change," he echoed, the word dripping with irony. "Those who hold the power define the game. We're just pieces on their board." A profound sadness settled around him, the burden of truth too heavy to bear. His dreams flickered like the dying embers of a fire, each flicker a reminder of what could never be. The tension crescendoed, and suddenly, a figure broke into the square, a Persian envoy, his robes flowing like a dark wave at the edge of a storm. With every step, he embodied the weight of politics, the pulse of ambition. The crowd quieted, breaths held tightly in the lungs, the air thick with apprehension. "The trade routes belong to us," he proclaimed, voice booming, echoing against the stone walls like a bell tolling in the distance. The power struggle ignited around us, the spark of conflict pricking the air with an electric charge. In that moment of confrontation, as Zainab's eyes widened and Malik's fists clenched, I felt the raw, visceral connection between us, three souls bound by the weight of history and the uncertainty of tomorrow. The trade routes, once a tapestry of hope, now twisted like a coiled serpent, threatening to strike at the heart of all we knew. I remember staring into Zainab's eyes, seeing the fire of her dreams mingling with the dark clouds of her fears. It was a heart-wrenching dance between ambition and despair, a reflection of a world on the brink of transformation. The influence of Islam was not merely a tide washing over the lands, it became a crucible, testing the very essence of humanity, trust, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of connection. As the shadows lengthened and the stars began to prick the sky, I felt the weight of our collective fate pressing down on us. The marketplace, once a sanctuary of trade and camaraderie, now felt like the stage of a tragic play, each act spiraling into the abyss of uncertainty. The winds of change howled through the streets, whispering promises of unity even as they threatened division. And in that twilight moment, I realized, this was not just a tale of trade, it was a reflection of us. A testament to our shared vulnerabilities and aspirations. No matter the darkness that loomed, the light of connection flickered, reminding us that in the heart of trade, the essence of humanity thrived. But as the night deepened, so did the conflict, and in the silence that followed, I could feel the impending storm, a clash of empires, dreams, and the relentless march of destiny. With hearts pounding and breaths caught, we stood at the precipice of change, the trade routes awaiting their fate, and the world holding its breath for what was to come. The wind howled through the narrow alleys of Tiznit, a relentless beast, curling around the stones, whispering secrets only the shadows could hear. I stood at the edge of the market, heart racing, breath shallow. The smell of spices, heavy and intoxicating, mingled with the distant echo of laughter. Women, bright in their vivid garments, danced through the chaos, their voices sharp and clear like the sun slicing through morning fog. But beneath the vibrant tapestry of the market, a storm brewed, and I could feel it in my bones. In that moment, I saw her, Amina, her dark curls wild, eyes fierce as she wrestled with a merchant over a sack of olives, the sun glinting off her brow. "I know the worth of my goods, and I refuse to be cheated," she shouted, her voice rising above the din. It was a fight I knew too well, the battle against a world that sought to silence her, to reduce her to mere shadows behind men. But Amina was a lioness, fierce and unyielding, her spirit igniting something deep within me. I remember the day she told me about her mother, a woman who had once traded in spices and silks, who whispered stories of her own struggles beneath the moonlight. "We are not just traders," Amina had declared, her voice thick with emotion, "we are the backbone of these markets. Without us, there would be no life, no rhythm." I felt the weight of her words like a stone in my chest, both a burden and a revelation. She fought not just for herself, but for every woman who had been silenced, forgotten. Beside her, there was Yasmina, her sister, a woman caught in the web of tradition and expectation. I could see the turmoil on her face as she watched Amina clash with the merchant. She hung back, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her scarf. "You must be careful," she whispered, the caution laced with fear. "What if he doesn't take kindly to your words?" I could feel the tension stretching between them like a tightrope, both yearning for freedom yet tethered by the weight of their family's expectations. Yasmina was the dreamer, her heart a prisoner of longing. She yearned for the world beyond Tisnit, yet felt the gravitational pull of her family's needs, the ever-looming shadows of duty. "You think I don't want to be like you?" Bold, fierce, she murmured, her voice quaking. "But what if I fail? What if I'm just not enough?" That fear, so palpable, wrapped around her like a noose. It gripped me, reminding me of my own insecurities, the relentless echo of inadequacy. As the argument escalated, I felt the air crackle with tension. Amina's unwavering spirit clashed against the merchant's arrogance, a storm of wills. She raised her voice higher, her words pouring out like molten lava, each syllable a defiance, an assertion of her power. "You think I'll back down? I am more than just a woman. I am the blood of this market." And there it was, the heartbeat of the community, the pulse of generations of women who had traded and toiled. Each transaction wrapped in history, tradition, and the fierce love that bound them. Amina's words reverberated through the crowd, drawing eyes and ears toward her, a raw magnetism that silenced even the most hardened hearts. But as I watched, I saw Yasmina's face twist in despair. She wanted to be like Amina, but the fear of societal judgment loomed like a specter above her. The shadows of doubt whispered cruel taunts, and I could feel her heart breaking, each beat a reminder of her own limitations. In that moment, the distance between them widened, a chasm filled with unspoken words and unshed tears. "Why can't you see?" Amina cried, her voice cracking, filled with desperation. "This is our fight. You can be part of this. You can fight with me." The words hung heavy in the air, thick with emotion, a plea laced with anger and love. I could see the flicker of something in Yasmina's eyes, a spark of rebellion, a yearning for freedom, but the chains of fear pulled her back. Then, like a thunderclap, the merchant struck the table, his voice booming, drowning out Amina's passion. "You disrespect me in my own market? You are nothing." The words sliced through the crowd, trailing a chilling silence. Amina's defiance wavered, but I could see in her eyes a deep well of strength, a flicker of the fire that had been ignited within her. "Watch me," she hissed, her voice low but fierce, as if she were speaking to the very universe. "I will rise. We will rise." The market held its breath, and in that moment, I felt the world tilt. I could feel the dreams of generations pulsing in the veins of these women, an ancient rhythm beating through the very stones beneath our feet. The hidden stories of mothers and daughters, of struggle and triumph, echoed like a haunting melody. And just like that, the storm in my heart raged on. I was pulled into their world, not as an outsider but as part of this living, breathing tapestry. As Amina and Yasmina faced their whispered fears and unyielding hopes, I felt the primal urge to stand with them. This was not just their battle, it was ours, a shared struggle that transcended borders, a testament to the unbreakable bond of sisterhood. Yet, as Amina continued her fierce stand against the merchant, Yasmina's hesitation loomed like a dark cloud. Would she step into the light, or would she remain shrouded in the shadows of doubt? I felt the tension crackle, a palpable energy that gripped my heart, urging me to scream, to shout, to do something. With breath caught in my throat, the moment hung suspended like a tightrope, wavering between fear and courage. The future lay ahead, a vast expanse filled with uncertainty, yet rich with promise. The world awaited, and the market pulsed, alive with stories yet untold. Time ticked on, relentless, a clock echoing in the background, and I felt the weight of their choices, the gravity of their paths unfolding. And so, I stood, caught in the whirlwind of their lives, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger tale, a narrative woven through the fabric of dreams, struggles, and the indomitable spirit of women. In this moment, everything felt suspended, and I knew, just knew, that the heart of the market would beat on, echoing the struggles and victories of women who refused to be silenced. The evening sky hung heavy, a bruised grape, just before the storm. A lone bird screeched overhead, as if voicing a warning. The air trembled with an uneasy energy, an omen that something was about to shatter the fragile peace. Inside the bustling souk, the scent of spices wafted through the narrow streets, a cacophony of colors, laughter, and the clattering of hooves. It was a day like any other. Until it wasn't. I remember the way Kadir's hands trembled as he weighed saffron against silver. The merchant scales had once whispered secrets of the desert, of old trades and the glories of his ancestors. But today, they screamed of loss. He looked up suddenly, his eyes darting to the entrance of the market, where shadows gathered like dark thoughts. The Europeans were here, swaggering with their foreign tongues, their strange currencies, gold and silver that shone but felt cold, a promise wrapped in betrayal. "Do you see them?" he hissed to Amina, his heart a war drum against his ribs. She was his sister, a fierce soul, a woman who had always fought against the tide of fate. Her shop was lined with vibrant woven rugs, remnants of a world that would soon be swallowed by the greed of giants. Amina's eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. "They come to take, not to trade," she said, her voice a low growl. "They come with their maps and their laws, seeking to carve our land into pieces." Her hands clenched into fists, the threads of her existence tangling in her grasp. Kadir felt the heat of her anger, the raw energy that could ignite a rebellion. But what good would it do, he thought, when the very fabric of their lives was being unraveled thread by thread? The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the cobblestones. Kadir's thoughts spiraled back to their father, a man who had once stood tall, commanding respect and reverence, a true king of trade. His death had left an ache, a gaping wound in their family. But now, the spectre of colonialism loomed larger than any grief, a phantom consuming the merchants, their livelihoods, their dreams. "I remember," he whispered, "when the caravans would roll in, laden with treasures from the Sahara. I remember the laughter, the deals struck under the weight of the stars." His voice trembled, suffocated by the memory of a time when the world felt boundless. Now, everything was a shackle, chains forged by foreign hands, tightening around their necks, squeezing the breath from their lungs. He glanced at Amina, whose defiance flickered like a candle in the wind. "They want our roots, Kadir. Our history. We cannot let them take it. We must fight." Her words burned in the air, igniting a fire deep within him. But how? How could two souls stand against an army of greed? The shadow of a colonial ship loomed over the horizon, its sails a promise of destruction, a harbinger of a new world disorder. "I remember," he repeated, his heart pounding. "My dreams of becoming a merchant like father. To fill the markets with treasures from the east and west. But now that dream is being snuffed out," Amina interrupted, her voice cracking. "They'll rip apart our trade routes, turn us into relics, forgotten in the annals of history." She stepped closer, her breath warm against his cheek. "We need allies. We need to rally the merchants, the tribes. We cannot let them lay waste to everything we hold dear." Kadir's mind raced, images swirling like a sandstorm. The whispers of those who had come before rose up within him, a chorus of voices urging him to remember who they were. But fear gripped him, clinging like smoke. What if they failed? What if their fight was futile against this tide of change? "Fear is poison, Kadir," she said, catching his gaze. "You know what we must do. Don't let them drown us in despair." A chilling silence fell, a pause pregnant with the weight of history. Kadir nodded slowly, the fire of determination igniting once more within him. He could feel the pulse of the past, the heartbeat of their ancestors urging him on. He was a merchant, a son of the desert. As if summoned by their resolve, the shadows lengthened, and the clatter of hooves grew louder, approaching with an ominous cadence. They were here, the colonizers, ready to impose their rule upon the land, disrupting the ancient rhythm of trade that had thrived for centuries. Amina turned, her expression fierce, a lioness ready to defend her territory. "We will stand together, brother. We will not yield. We will remind them of who we are." Their hearts beat as one, a thundering anthem against the encroaching storm. Qadir felt the weight of history upon his shoulders, like the heavy cloak of a prophet. The first shout pierced the air, shrill and demanding. "You will trade in our coins, follow our laws." The European officer loomed over them, a figure of authority, an apparition of dread. Qadir's breath caught, but Amina stepped forward, her voice ringing out like a bell. "No. This is our land. Our trade. You will not take it from us." With those words, Qadir felt an electric surge, a connection with the land beneath his feet, the centuries of stories woven into the fabric of their existence. The crowd around them began to swell, drawn by her defiance, by the fire igniting within them. The tension snapped, a brittle silence giving way to a wave of emotion. Merchants rallied, voices raised in unity, a tapestry of resistance woven from fear and hope, striking against the encroaching darkness. And as Qadir glanced at Amina, her eyes ablaze with passion, he knew they were not just fighting for their livelihoods, but for their very essence, their identity, their soul. They were the Berbers, carriers of history, guardians of trade, and they would not vanish into the night. The storm was upon them, but in that moment, it felt like they were the eye of it, standing firm against the chaos that threatened to consume them whole. The wind howled, the world shifted beneath their feet, but their hearts beat louder, thundering with a promise: they would not be forgotten. They would not be erased. And in that shared moment of defiance, they became more than themselves, they became the voices of their ancestors, the promise of their future, a living testament against the tide of colonialism that sought to drown them in silence. The sun hung low, bleeding orange and crimson across the vast Sahara, where the dunes whispered stories of forgotten caravans. An old man, Ahmed, stood beside his weathered camel, the animal's breath vaporizing in the chill of twilight. He had traded in these sands for decades, each grain a memory, each step a heartbeat of the past. Today, though, the air crackled with a tension that threatened to shatter the fragile veil of his routine. "I remember when the wind carried secrets, not machines," he muttered, glancing at the horizon where the faint roar of engines intruded upon the ancient stillness. The world had changed, swallowing the desert whole, and like a spectre, the oncoming trucks crested the dunes, iron beasts with tires that churned the sand and spat it like bile. The heart of the Sahara was no longer a sanctuary for traders and nomads, but a battleground for commerce, technology, and dreams lost in the dust. Beside him, Fatima, his daughter, fidgeted with the hem of her tattered shawl. Each truck that passed seemed to echo her fear, a fear that the Sahara would lose its soul, that the essence of their existence would be trampled beneath the weight of progress. She had inherited her father's spirit but bore the burden of a world that demanded something different. The old trade routes, once vibrant with life, now felt like ghosts, drifting in the wake of the roaring engines. "I long for the days of barter, of trust and stories," she sighed, her voice barely a whisper. "Now, it's just deals made in fleeting moments, greed chasing after the next big thing." Ahmed's heart ached in response. He watched her, this fierce and beautiful woman who carried the weight of their ancestry in her soul. "Change is the only constant," he replied, his words heavy with acceptance and regret. The irony of it knotted in his chest. He had fought against the tide of time, yet here it was, crashing against their lives like a relentless wave. Suddenly, a shout pierced the air. Shadows darted across the sands. A group of young men, faces masked against the dust, charged forward, brandishing smartphones and capturing the moment in a frenzy of clicks and laughter. They were the new traders, the ones who saw the Sahara as a backdrop for flashy videos, where the ancient art of negotiation was replaced by the cold allure of clicks and likes. "Look at this," one of them yelled, waving a phone like a trophy. "We're selling the desert. Just take a selfie with the dunes." Fatima's heart sank. "They don't understand," she breathed, the weight of her despair palpable. "To them, it's just a game. Ahmed felt the fire of her frustration ignite within him. He stepped forward, his voice trembling with aged wisdom. The Sahara is not a game. It is history, it is life. It is the blood of our ancestors. The young men halted. They exchanged looks, amusement fading into uncertainty. One of them, his bravado flickering, retorted, "But this is the future, old man. You can't stop it." "Maybe not," Ahmed replied, his voice steady but heavy. "But you can honor what came before you. You can carry the wisdom of the sands within your heart." The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence. They were caught between the allure of progress and the lingering shadows of the past. In that moment, Ahmed saw a flicker of understanding in their eyes, a fleeting recognition that perhaps the desert still held secrets worth seeking beyond the flashing lights of their devices. Fatima stepped closer to her father, feeling the weight of his words wrap around her like a protective shroud. "Can we still find a balance?" she asked, each word laced with hope. "Can we embrace the new without forsaking the old?" Ahmed looked into her eyes, feeling the tremors of uncertainty ripple through their connection. "That is the question, my daughter. The world demands speed, but the Sahara teaches us patience. We must find a way to weave the two together." As dusk descended, the silhouettes of the trucks loomed, stark against the fading light. They were symbols of a relentless advance, but they also heralded change, an uncertain future that could either suffocate or invigorate the lifeblood of trade. In the distance, a storm began to brew, dark clouds swirling like a tempest of emotions, stirring memories and fears. Ahmed felt it in his bones, a whisper of what was to come, the clash of old traditions against the march of modernization. "I remember when the storms came and the winds howled with the cries of our ancestors," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Now, they are silent, watching us." Fatima nodded, her heart aching for the lost stories, the forgotten voices. "We can be their echoes," she whispered, and in that moment, they both understood that the ghosts of the Sahara were not gone, they lingered, waiting for someone to listen. As the first drops of rain fell, mingling with the dust, Ahmed and Fatima stood united, two souls entwined with the past yet reaching toward the future, balanced on the precipice of change. The storm crackled with potential, a reminder that every ending births a new beginning, even in a land as unforgiving as the Sahara. And somewhere deep within, they both felt the heartbeat of their home, the rhythm of trade, the pulse of life that refused to be erased. What lay ahead was unknown, but they knew one thing: they would carry the spirit of the sands with them, forging a path that honored both tradition and innovation. The winds howled, the future loomed, but the echoes of their hearts remained steadfast, carving their place in the ever-shifting sands of time. The market was alive, a cacophony of voices rising like the sun over the Atlas Mountains. I stood there, surrounded by vibrant colors, rich indigo, sunburnt terracotta, and the golden sheen of spices wafting through the air. I remembered my grandmother's voice, whispering tales of ancient trade routes that crisscrossed the desert like veins in the earth. "Do not forget who you are," she said, her eyes deep wells of wisdom and sorrow, cradling the weight of our ancestors' dreams. But today, I was enmeshed in a different kind of chaos. The clamor of tourists surged through the narrow streets, their laughter a jarring contrast to the solemnity of my heritage. I could feel the sweat trickle down my spine, the anxiety bubbling beneath my skin. I knew my name, my lineage, stitched together with threads of ancestry and stories. Yet, what did it all mean when the world outside screamed for homogenization? The globalization that promised connection was the very force threatening to erase the essence of Berber identity. Youssef stood beside me, his hands trembling as he clutched a hand-woven rug, its intricate patterns telling tales of hills kissed by the winds of history. "This was my father's, my grandfather's," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Each thread represented a memory, a fragment of our past. But as tourists snapped photos, as they admired the craftsmanship without understanding the blood that coursed through the fibers, I could see the fear in his eyes. The fear of being reduced to a mere exhibit, a relic in a museum of forgetfulness. "I remember when the market was ours," he said, voice cracking. "When people came to buy not just our goods, but a piece of our soul." I wanted to reach out, to tell him that we weren't just memories waiting to be consumed, but living, breathing stories. The sun dipped lower, casting shadows that danced like specters over our lives. I glanced at Amina, who stood with her stall of spices, her hands deftly arranging saffron, cumin, and cinnamon. Her laughter belied a fierce determination, yet I could see the fear lurking behind her smile, as if she were trying to block out the encroaching darkness. The spices had been a part of her family for generations, their secrets spilling from her lips as she spoke with customers. But how long could she keep the tradition alive? How long before the world outside wrapped its tendrils around her, turning her vibrant life into just another product for consumption? Do they even know what they're buying? Amina's voice was a whisper, her eyes scanning the crowd. Do they know the story of each grain, the labor of love behind every jar? She was right, the world had become a place where everything was reduced to a transaction, a commodity stripped of its roots. As dusk fell, the market flickered with the glow of lanterns, and the atmosphere thickened with unresolved tension. A group of young men approached our stalls, drawn not by our culture but by the thrill of the exotic. They spoke in quick, loud bursts, tossing around words like authentic and exotic as if they were mere playthings. I could see Yusef's jaw tighten, his fingers clutching the edges of the rug, white-knuckled with the weight of history. "Look at them," he hissed, eyes narrowing. "They don't see us. They see a backdrop for their Instagram. They don't realize they're buying our very identity." Each word struck me like a bell tolling, the finality of a truth we were all skirting around. Amina stepped forward, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "What if we gave them a taste of who we are?" she proposed, a spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "What if we turned this into a conversation instead of a transaction?" It was the kind of idea that shimmered with possibility yet trembled under the weight of uncertainty. I could feel the heartbeat of our culture thrumming beneath the surface, a pulse that resonated with every interaction. What if we could reclaim our narrative, redefine our identity in a world that sought to mute our voices? I thought of the stories my grandmother had told me of trade as a bridge rather than a wall. Each exchange had once been an act of intimacy, a sharing of essence that transcended mere goods. As the night deepened, we gathered around Amina's stall, a coalition of broken dreams and fierce hope. We began to share stories of our ancestors, the fragrance of our spices mixing with the air, weaving a tapestry of our existence right there on the cobblestones. "Tell them the story of this spice," Amina urged, and I nodded, feeling the warmth of my own voice resonating. How it traveled from the mountains, how it was once a gift between lovers, a promise sealed with the essence of the earth. I poured every ounce of my longing into each word, hoping that in sharing our stories, we could stitch together the frayed edges of our identity. But just as our stories began to weave a new narrative, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows, a figure lurking, a reminder that polarization was never far away. The specter of commodification loomed, waiting to snatch away our agency, to transform our expressions into mere products on a shelf. Yet in that moment, amongst the laughter and the stories shared, I realized, the heart of Berber identity beats not in isolation, but in connection. It is a culture preserved not merely through goods, but through the narratives that breathe life into them. I turned to Yusef and Amina, the flicker of hope igniting. "Together," I said, "we can shape our identity, tell our stories, and dance amidst globalization, not as relics of the past, but as vibrant voices in a world desperate for authenticity." The night unfolded, the stars above a witness to our resolve. The market had transformed from a place of anxiety into a sanctuary of belonging, a home where our shared heartbeat resonated through the ages. And as the world around us spun on, I felt the roots of our heritage entwining with the dreams of our future, an unbreakable bond born of history and hope. And somewhere, amidst the clamor of a world intent on forgetting, our stories whispered back, echoing into the night, daring to dream, daring to be heard. The air was thick with tension, a fog of anticipation swirling like a restless spirit, and under the dim glow of flickering candles, I stood frozen, heart racing, as the scent of burning sage wrapped around my throat like a noose. The market was alive, a cacophony of voices and laughter, but I could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes piercing through me, searching, judging. My palms were clammy, my pulse thundered in my ears, and I could hear my breath, ragged and shallow, as if the very act of inhaling might summon forth the specters of countless transactions gone wrong. I remember the moment clearly, a bead of sweat tracing a path down my spine, the whisper of a breeze that felt more like a warning than a welcome. Amelia stood beside me, her fingers twitching nervously at her sides, a habit she couldn't shake. Her eyes darted around, seeking reassurance in the faces of traders who wore their fortunes like armor. Confidence dripped from them in glossy layers, while we stood like moths to the flame, vulnerable and exposed. "Tonight's the night, isn't it?" she whispered, her voice barely rising above the din. "If we don't make this trade," the unspoken fear clung to her words, thick and suffocating, and I could see the shadow of doubt lurking behind her bright blue eyes. They were the kind of eyes that could hold the sun, yet now seemed clouded with uncertainty. "It has to be," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like a mask over my fear. "We can't let the spirits down again. Not after last month." The memory cut through me, sharp and vivid, the old woman who'd cursed us with a curse so potent I could still taste its bitterness on my tongue. We'd left her stall empty-handed, and she'd screamed, her voice a banshee's wail, echoing in my mind like a ghost haunting the edges of my consciousness. Amelia shivered, and I wanted to reach out, to pull her into the warmth of my resolve, but fear tethered me to that moment. We were traders, yes, but we were also the unwitting stewards of ancient rituals, guardians of beliefs that danced on the edge of madness. The townsfolk spoke of fortune as if it were a fickle lover, one who might embrace you one day and abandon you the next. I didn't want to think of that, a chilling thought that gripped my heart in icy fingers. I spotted Thomas, the old man with a face etched in lines of experience, shuffling toward us with a knowing smile. He was a relic of the past, a keeper of secrets that clung to him like the scent of oil and spices. "You two look lost," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. "You're not here to haggle, are you?" "Not tonight." I hesitated, my throat tightening, memories flooding back, my mother's warnings, the old stories of traders who met their fates under a blood moon. "What if we don't have the right offerings?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if the spirits are angry?" "Angry?" He chuckled, a deep rumble that resonated through the crowd. "My dear, the spirits don't care about offerings. They care about intent. You must believe in what you're trading. You must feel it in your bones." And then it hit me like a tidal wave. What if we were trading more than goods? What if we were bartering pieces of our souls? The weight of that thought pressed down on my chest, and I glanced at Amelia, who looked as pale as a ghost. "I remember the stories," I murmured, almost to myself, "the ones about the shadows that linger after a deal goes wrong, the voices that cry out for justice." "Shut up!" Amelia hissed, her eyes wide, darting left and right, scanning the crowd as if expecting an unseen force to descend upon us. "Do not say those words here. This is a sacred place." Her voice was a whisper, but it crashed against the walls of my defiance, shattering my resolve. Thomas stepped closer, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "You're right to be afraid, child. Every trader here knows that fear is an ancient currency. It's part of the game. But you have to spin it into something beautiful. You have to believe." His words hung in the air, heavy and resonant, sending shivers down my spine. The weight of belief felt like a mantle, pressing down, and I could see the shadows swirling, merchants with their wares, whispers of old trades, and the echoes of those who had come before us, who had knelt before the spirits and prayed for protection, for fortune. Amelia stepped back, fear flickering in her eyes. "What if we fail? What if we don't have enough?" "Enough of what?" I shot back, frustration bubbling within me. "What do we even know of enough? Enough luck? Enough protection? Enough dreams?" My voice cracked, the intensity of the moment crackling like static electricity between us. We stood there, on the precipice of fate, two souls entwined with the spirals of time, our hopes and fears battling like titans within the confines of our hearts. I felt the world around us shift, a dance of spirit swirling in the periphery, urging us forward, daring us to take that step into the unknown. The night deepened, shadows stretching long, and I could hear the soft murmurs of the market transforming, an orchestra of fortunes colliding, dreams intertwining. I could feel the power rising, a tide of energy that pulsed through the air, whispering ancient promises and warnings alike. As I stood there, caught in the web of uncertainty, I could feel the clock ticking, each second an echo of what could be lost. Amelia's breath was steadying, and I followed her gaze as she focused on the stall ahead, where the shimmering fabrics glowed like memories waiting to be unraveled. "Shall we?" she said, and her voice was a blade cutting through the fog, sharp and resolute. In that moment, I understood. We were not just trading goods. We were trading our fears for dreams, our uncertainties for fortune, and the weight of our spirits hung between us, a fragile balance that could tip at any moment. And as we moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that behind every deal lay the specter of those who had come before us, watching, waiting. The air crackled with possibilities, and the night held its breath, as if the universe itself was waiting for us to make our choice. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting crimson shadows over the bustling marketplace of Timbuktu. The air was thick, suffocating with the musk of spices and the whispers of countless stories. Merchants shouted, their voices an orchestra of urgency. Sand danced in the wind, swirling around me like restless spirits. In the heart of this cacophony stood Idris, a Berber merchant, his calloused hands gripping a hilt of gold-inlaid silk. The weight of his family's legacy pressed upon him like the shifting sands of the desert, relentless and unyielding. I remember the moment he turned, his eyes two pools of desperation and ambition. "Today, I must trade or lose everything," he murmured, a promise dangling on his lips like the last thread of hope. But shadows loomed, cloaked figures lurking at the edges, eyes glinting with envy. They craved his downfall, their hunger palpable. Idris, with all his vulnerabilities laid bare, felt it in his bones, a chill creeping through his veins. Could he outsmart them? Could he summon the strength of his ancestors, the ghosts of merchants who walked these streets before him? Across the market, Amina, Idris's sister, balanced her own burdens. The spices she sold were not merely commodities, they were memories, echoes of laughter and warmth from their childhood. Each tiny vial filled with saffron or cinnamon whispered stories of their mother's hands, shaking with age yet steady in purpose. She grinned at the customers, but her heart raced with the fear of loss. Every dinar they earned was a glimmer of hope in a world where instability loomed like a scavenger. I remember the taste of our mother's honey cakes, she thought, a fleeting smile breaking through the tension. But honey can sour, too. Their father's legacy weighed heavily on them, a ghost haunting every transaction. Ibrahim, the once mighty merchant, was now a shadow of himself, lost to the greed that devoured his dreams. "I will not be my father," Idris vowed. "I will rise." Yet, with every breath, doubt clawed at him, a reminder that the sands of time slipped too easily through fingers too eager to grasp. As day turned to dusk, the city morphed. Flames flickered in lanterns, casting eerie shadows that twisted like the secrets of the night. The faces around him became blurred, indistinct, but the tension in the air sharpened. Idris's heart pounded, a war drum echoing through his chest. He felt like a specter in his own life, trapped in a moment that could define his existence forever. Amina's laughter cut through the darkness, raw and real. "Idris, do you remember the time we nearly drowned in the river?" she teased, trying to lighten the oppressive atmosphere. "It was a desperate ploy, but it worked." Idris chuckled, almost reluctantly. "Only because you insisted on swimming in your best dress." But even laughter couldn't dispel the shadows lurking at the edges of their reality. Suddenly, a shout pierced the night, an echo of betrayal. A figure lurched forward, his intentions sharp, eyes filled with desperation that mirrored Idris's own. "You think you can steal my trade, Berber," he spat, venom dripping from each word. The crowd shifted, anticipation crackling like dry brush. Idris stood frozen, a statue of fear and defiance. Around them, the bustling bazaar transformed into a coliseum, an arena for survival. Time slowed. Idris could hear his heartbeat, each thud pumping adrenaline through him, igniting a primal instinct. He thought of his sister, the way she fought for every dinar, how she had believed in him when he had nearly lost faith in himself. "I remember our dreams," he whispered under his breath. "I remember why I fight." With a surge that broke the spell of fear, Idris stepped forward, his voice a fierce gale against the approaching storm. "You want my trade? Come take it," he shouted, fists clenched, heart racing. The crowd roared, a tide of energy crashing against the shores of despair. He could feel the weight of their hopes and fears, a collective heartbeat pulsing through the night. Amina's eyes widened, she felt the shift, the electricity in the air, a dance of fate. "Idris, wait!" Her voice broke through the chaos as she rushed to his side, grabbing his arm. She was the anchor he desperately needed, her strength unwavering. "Don't let anger blind you. Remember who we are." "Who we are?" Idris stared, his face a mask of fury and confusion, emotions wrestling inside him. "We are the ones they want to crush." "Then let's not give them the satisfaction." Amina's voice was fierce, and she was a firebrand in the night, her spirit igniting a flame within him. "Together, we are stronger. Together, we can rewrite our story." And just like that, the tide began to turn. The onlookers shifted from fear to solidarity, a palpable bond forming in the chaos. Idris knew then, this was not just about trade. It was about legacy, about reclaiming their narrative from the claws of despair. They were Berbers, descendants of traders who weaved through the sands of time, their stories sewn into the very fabric of history. The confrontation loomed, electric and inevitable. Idris felt alive, every nerve ending buzzing with purpose. As the rival merchant advanced, a smirk on his lips and malice in his eyes, Idris stood resolute. "Let's dance," he thought, embracing the storm. Amina stood firm beside him, the weight of their shed blood binding them in this moment of reckoning. And as the clock ticked toward an uncertain future, when the laughter of childhood and the cries of battle would blend into one, the marketplace pulsed with life. Shadows whispered, and the echoes of generations past lingered in the air. Here, in this fleeting breath of existence, they were not just merchants, they were warriors of trade, bearers of dreams and despair, echoes of an unquenchable spirit that would not be silenced. The night was far from over, and the story was only just beginning. The marketplace was alive, an electric pulse coursing through the narrow alleys of Tiznit, where the air was thick with the scent of spices and the echoes of distant laughter. I stood there, surrounded by vibrant colors, piles of saffron, turmeric, and cinnamon, each one a whisper of history, a legacy etched in the very fabric of our existence. A cacophony of voices pulled at my attention, but beneath the surface lay a current of tension, a rising tide threatening to drown us all. I remember the heat of the sun biting down as if it knew my fears, as if it could smell the sweat on my brow, the uncertainty in my heart. Fatima, my sister, stood beside me, her eyes wide, reflecting both hope and dread. She was a merchant's daughter, but in this ever-changing world, her role felt precarious, like balancing on the edge of a knife. "What if they don't want our goods anymore?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. "What if they only want what comes from far away?" I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that our roots ran deep in this soil, that the Berber spirit was as indomitable as the Atlas Mountains. But I couldn't shake the fear gnawing at my own heart. The global marketplace had become a beast, one that devoured authenticity, one that spat out the remnants of culture in exchange for mass-produced trinkets. I was a merchant, yes, but I was also a guardian of our traditions, a shield against the encroaching shadows of globalization. Then, as if the universe had conspired against us, there came a voice cutting through the crowd, a foreigner, a stranger with a slick suit and a briefcase. He spoke of efficiency, of better margins, and I felt my stomach twist. He was offering us a deal, an opportunity wrapped in a shiny bow. But at what cost? He didn't speak our language, not really. He was fluent in the cold calculus of profit and loss, while we spoke in the language of the earth, of sun-kissed olives and the warmth of shared stories. "Don't listen to him," I hissed to Fatima, but she was entranced, her gaze caught in a web of new promises. The world outside beckoned, a siren song of prosperity that threatened to drown out the echoes of our ancestors. I could see the longing in her eyes, the allure of modernity. "What if this is our chance?" she countered, and I felt the weight of her desperation. In that moment, I was confronted with my own demons. I had always been the brave one, the protector. But now, a flicker of doubt ignited within me. Was I clinging to a dream, a fantasy of what once was? Or was I truly defending something worth fighting for? The shadows danced around us, whispers of change lurking just beyond the bustling stalls. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the chaos, I caught sight of Malik, a fellow merchant and my childhood friend. His hands were rough with the calluses of labor, but his spirit shone like the stars above the Sahara. "Don't let them take your heart," he warned, eyes blazing with fervor. "What they offer is a cage. We are the wind, the desert, the timeless essence of trade. Let them not box us in." His words struck a chord deep within me, a reminder of our shared history, the caravans that once traversed these lands carrying silk and spices, the stories passed down through generations like sacred scrolls. But in the face of globalization's relentless tide, would our stories withstand the storm? I remember the nights we'd sit under the stars, sharing dreams and fears, as the desert wind whispered secrets of the universe. "What will become of us?" I had asked him once, the weight of the question heavy with uncertainty. His laughter rang through the stillness like a bell. "We will adapt, as we always have. Change is not our enemy, forgetting who we are is." But now, as I stood at the precipice of decision, I felt the burden of history pressing down on me. Fatima looked at me, her eyes pleading for guidance, for certainty in a world that had become anything but predictable. "What do we do, brother?" I glanced at the foreigner, still drumming his fingers on the table, still spinning his tales of wealth. The shadows deepened, and the laughter faded to a haunting echo. I felt anger bubbling up, a primal urge to protect, to defend. "We stand our ground," I declared, my voice rising above the din. "We will not sacrifice our identity for the empty promise of profit. We are Berber, and we will remain rooted in our heritage." In that moment, a tension crackled in the air. The foreigner's smile faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. Fatima's face lit up, hope igniting like kindling in the dark. But I knew the battle was not over, it had only just begun. The marketplace erupted into a frenzy. The laughter returned, but it felt different now, tinged with defiance. In the heart of the chaos, I could feel the pulse of resistance, the spirit of our ancestors rising to meet the challenges of a new world. I would protect our history. I would embrace the future. The shadows around us shifted, morphing into something both beautiful and terrifying. The clock ticked, but time felt elastic, stretching and bending in ways I could not fathom. I knew we would face storms ahead, economic, cultural, existential. But in that moment of clarity, I understood, the struggle itself was a part of our story, and we would write every chapter with fierce determination, with laughter and tears, as the stars continued to swirl above, indifferent yet magical. And as I looked at Fatima, her spirit reborn, I knew that our journey would transcend this marketplace, this moment. The world would spin on, and we would be there, merchants of our own fate, threading dreams into the fabric of an ever-changing tapestry. The horizon awaited, alive with possibility, and we would greet it with open arms, unwavering hearts, and voices that would echo through eternity. The sun hung low in the sky, a burnt orange sphere casting long shadows over the bustling market of Marrakesh. A cacophony of voices filled the air, laughter intermingled with the cries of merchants hawking their wares, yet an undercurrent of tension rippled through the crowd. I could feel it, a tightening in my chest, heavy as the weight of the spices piled high around me. Each bag of saffron, each jar of preserved lemons whispered a story of journeys across the vast Sahara, of trade routes lined with secrets and dreams. In that moment, I saw Khalid, a merchant with eyes that sparkled like the stars hanging overhead, though his heart was a storm cloud of regret. He stood in the shadow of his stall, a man made small by the enormity of his past. I remember the first time I met him, his hands expertly arranging the goods, his smile as infectious as the laughter of children chasing a stray goat through the alleys. But today, there was no laughter, only the weight of betrayal heavy in the air. "Khalid, the caravans are late," a voice cut through the noise, sharp as a dagger. Fatima, his sister, her face a mask of worry, approached him. She was the anchor in his stormy sea, yet today, even she felt the waves rising. "What if they don't come back? What if—" "Stop it," Khalid snapped, the pain of unspoken words bubbling to the surface. "We need the trade, Fatima. Without it, we're nothing." Her eyes were dark pools of fear, reflecting the uncertainty that gripped the city. I remember the stories she told me, tales of the great caravans that once snaked their way through the dunes, laden with gold and silk, spices and salt. Those days felt like a distant dream now, a mirage fading in the heat of reality. Each day passed like the slow ticking of a clock, an ominous reminder of the time slipping away. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, a haunting echo of the past whispering through the air. Parched tongues in the desert spoke of a legendary merchant, the Berber who had once ruled the trade routes, a ghostly figure whose legacy still lingered in the shadows. His name was spoken in reverent tones, a blend of fear and admiration. What had become of that power? Do you remember the stories, Khalid? Fatima's voice trembled, breaking the spell of despair that hung between them. The tales of the Berber merchant who could buy the sun. A flicker of something passed over Khalid's face, nostalgia tinged with bitterness. That was long ago, sister. The world has changed. And yet, the heart of the crowd pulsed with an echo of that legacy. Merchants bartered, their voices rising and falling like the tide, a desperate dance of survival. I could see the shimmer of hope in their eyes, the belief that the past could still breathe life into the present. It was intoxicating, thrilling, yet perilous, a tightrope walk above a chasm of despair. The scent of spices hung thick in the air, a reminder of the richness of their trade, but beneath it lay something darker, something menacing. Shadows crept closer, and I could feel the eyes of the past watching through the cracks of time. Memories surged, Khalid's father, a man of dignity, his hands weathered yet strong, guiding his son through the sun-baked streets, teaching him the secrets of the trade. I remembered the laughter that filled their home, the warmth of family bonds. But that warmth had been snatched away, leaving only echoes of laughter, replaced by the icy grip of loss. "We are not our fathers," Khalid had whispered to me once, a confession cloaked in regret. "We are shadows, remnants of what once was." Fatima stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If the caravans do not return, what will we do? The shadows will swallow us." A shudder ran through Khalid, the weight of their shared history pressing down on him like the scorching sun above. The ghosts of trade routes once filled with promise now felt like a tomb. I could see the flicker of anger ignite in his chest, a tempest brewing beneath the surface. "I will not let this be our legacy." His voice rose above the din of the market, raw and desperate, a proclamation that hung heavy in the air. The crowd fell silent, eyes turning toward him, magnetized by the intensity of his words. In that heartbeat, time seemed to stand still, as if the universe held its breath. The energy crackled, a storm brewing, and the legacy of the Berber merchant surged forward, a tidal wave of ambition, history, and unfulfilled dreams threatening to crash down upon them all. But just as quickly, the moment shattered. The sound of footsteps echoed ominously, a band of men clad in dark garb stepped into the square, their intentions cloaked in shadows. The tension twisted tighter, a noose of fear tightening around the heart of the marketplace. Khalid's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition sparking in the depths of his soul. "Leave! Now," he shouted, urgency breaking through the despair as he grasped Fatima's arm, pulling her toward a narrow alley. The crowd erupted into chaos, a living organism fleeing from danger, panic igniting their limbs. I stood rooted, heart pounding, pulse racing. I remembered, what had the Berber merchant felt during moments of crisis? Was it fear or resolve? Could he have known that every trade, every journey was a thread woven into the fabric of history, binding them all together? The shadows loomed closer, and I could almost hear the whispers of the past creeping in, wrapping me in a chilling embrace. The caravan routes had once been lifelines, arteries pulsing with life, now threatened by those who sought only to take. And as Khalid and Fatima disappeared into the alley, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The legacy of the Berber merchant was not just a tale of trade, but a battle for survival, a fight against the encroaching darkness. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, a fleeting glimpse of beauty before night fell. Fear mingled with hope. A haunting melody of conflict played in the air, a reminder that the past was never truly gone. It lingered, waiting for the right moment to rise again. I felt it in my bones, a truth that pulled at my heart. The story was far from over. In the silence that followed the chaos, I sensed the weight of history looming, a promise of battles yet to be fought, of legacies yet to be forged beneath the stars.